This screencast corresponds with the IB topic 8.2 on energy sources and energy density. It would be a good idea if you have read Tsokos Chapter 7.1, pages 417 to 420. This screencast corresponds with the IB topics 8.2.1 to 8.2.6. So let's take a look at what we're going to be talking about. You need to be able to identify different world energy sources, and you need to be able to outline and distinguish between the difference between renewable and non-renewable energy sources. We're going to be talking about an idea called energy density of a fuel, and we'll talk about how you choose a fuel based upon its energy density. We're going to talk a little bit about the relative proportions of the world use of different energy sources that are available, and we'll discuss the advantages and disadvantages of various energy sources. All living things, including humans, require energy to stay alive, but there's a huge difference between the amount of energy per person used by ancient peoples and the amount of energy per person that we use today. So estimates are that ancient peoples, and by ancient peoples we mean basically hunter-gatherer societies, used about 8 million joules or 8 megajoules of energy per day. Today, the worldwide average energy use per person is about 300 megajoules per day, but in first world countries, industrialized societies like the US, we use about 900 megajoules per day. So over 100 times more energy per person than was used in ancient times. Energy sources can be defined as being either renewable or non-renewable energy sources. Renewable energy sources are energy sources that we will not run out of. They're sustainable. Non-renewable energy sources are energy sources that we will eventually run out of. Let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of various energy sources, starting with fossil fuels. The advantages of fossil fuels are they're relatively cheap. Despite people complaining about the price of gasoline, fossil fuels are the cheapest energy source that we use. They have a high energy density. That means that for a given mass of a fossil fuel, say gasoline, we get a lot of joules of energy. Another advantage is we have designed a variety of devices which take advantage of the energy in fossil fuels. Think about automobile engines and turbines and furnaces and things like that. And another advantage is that we have an extensive distribution network in place. Think about how many gas stations there are in the world, and think about things like pipelines which deliver natural gas to your home. It makes things very convenient. Some of the disadvantages of fossil fuels are they are non-renewable. We will eventually run out of oil. They pollute the environment. And when you burn fossil fuels, one of the byproducts is carbon dioxide, which is a major contributor to global warming. Let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of nuclear power. One big advantage of nuclear power is a very high energy density. You get a lot of energy from a very small mass of nuclear fuel. Another advantage is that even though nuclear fuels are not renewable, we mine them, there are large reserves of nuclear fuels. Another big advantage is that no CO2 is produced, and therefore it doesn't contribute to global warming. There are some disadvantages to nuclear energy. One is that the byproducts of the fuel being used are very hard to get rid of. Most of the spent fuel rods from nuclear reactors are still sitting next to the reactors where they were used. Another disadvantage is in the event of a radiation release, it can be a major health hazard. Think about Fukushima in Japan a couple of years ago. Another disadvantage is the problems that are associated with uranium mining. There are some real health issues with the people that have to work in uranium mines. And another disadvantage is a possibility that the nuclear fuel that's designed for being used in a reactor may be diverted for nuclear weapons. Let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of solar power. One big advantage is sunlight is free. Another big advantage is it's continuous. It's a renewable energy source. We cannot use it all up. And another big advantage is solar energy is clean, there's no carbon emissions. There are some disadvantages to solar power though. One is it only works when the sun's shining, only in the daytime. You can't make electricity at night with solar power. It's affected by cloudy weather. You really need a clear, bright blue sky in order to generate electricity with solar power. Another disadvantage is the amount of power output you get for a given area of power plant is relatively small. 1,000 watts per square meter is the max. As a result of that, generating power by solar energy requires large areas, and the initial costs to start up a plant are high. Another source of power is hydroelectric power. So let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of hydroelectric power. One big advantage is it's free. Another advantage is it's a renewable energy source. And a third advantage is it's clean. That means it doesn't produce any carbon dioxide emissions. The disadvantages of hydroelectric power is that it varies dependent upon geographic location. You need to be somewhere where there's a lot of water that you can dam up and make lakes. Another disadvantage is it causes drastic changes to the environment because usually you're building dams and forming artificial lakes which will flood natural areas. And another disadvantage is dams are expensive, so the initial costs are high. Another source of energy is wind power. The advantages of wind power are it's free, it's inexhaustible, it's a renewable energy source, there's no carbon emissions, so it's clean, and it's ideal for remote island locations that tend to have a lot of wind and area available. The disadvantages of wind power is it only works when the wind is blowing, so it's not reliable. It has a low power output, and we'll be talking about the equation for calculating the power output a little later on. It's aesthetically unpleasant. The wind generators are large, they generate quite a bit of noise, they kill birds, people don't like them for those reasons. They're not good in cities, and the maintenance cost to keep the wind generators running is high. The last energy source we're going to talk about is wave power. That is harnessing ocean waves to generate electricity. Advantages: waves are free, you get a reasonable energy density, it's a renewable energy source, it's clean, there's no carbon emissions. There's some serious disadvantages though. There aren't very many places where you can make electricity with waves. You need large waves. It won't work in Kansas. Waves tend to be irregular in shape, and it makes it difficult to get a high efficiency. The low frequency of waves in the ocean tends to make it difficult to harness the energy. Maintaining and installing equipment is expensive. Seawater is very corrosive, and it tends to be in remote locations. The remote locations makes transmitting the power to users difficult. And finally, the wave generators have to be able to withstand severe storms. The last topic I'd like to talk about today is energy density. Energy density is the energy, measured in joules, that you get from a quantity of fuel measured in kilograms. Therefore, energy density is measured in joules per kilogram. Energy density is a useful concept, especially if you're talking about energy used for transportation. Because if you're using the fuel source to power a vehicle, the weight of the fuel is very important. That's it for topic 8.2. We'll see you next time.